You're listening to REIA Radio, the nationally trusted name in real estate investing. We dig deep to discover investors' why in real estate. If you want to skip all the BS and get in investors' heads, you're in the right spot. Be one of the thousands to check out REIARadio.com.
I believe a person can't have 100 friends. As a matter of fact, I feel like they can basically have 5 close friends because friendships are a lot of work and it's a lot of two-way interaction. So I like to repel the people that would just be nice to me because it's the polite thing to do and draw toward me the people who are going to challenge me and push me to be better and let me push them to be better. And so by doing it, it just creates a faster way to get to what the end result's probably going to be anyway.
This episode is brought to you by JM Real Estate Capital.
Hi, it's Rob, JM Real Estate Capital. We're the money guys that you need to know for all your real estate investments. Talk to us. We can do what your local bank can't or won't do. We don't have millions, we have trillions with a T to lend. 844-WE-CLOSE or go online at jmrecapital.com. That's jmrecapital.com. JM Real Estate Capital, smart solutions for the real estate investor.
Welcome to REIA Radio, episode 193 with Katie Neason and Megan Ahern.
Yes.
Katie, here's the question to start the day. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
After that intro.
I know you're so excited. So you've brought buildings back to life in so many ways, but I noticed you've also incorporated murals into your projects. If you could commission a mural anywhere in the world today with no budget, no restrictions, no red tape, where would it be and what would it say?
It would totally be in my hometown because I'm trying to create the best place on earth. And I don't know what it would say. So here's the irony of us doing murals. I know nothing about art. I can look at it and say, yeah, I like it or I don't, but I don't even really know why. So when we commission the murals in our town that we've done, we put a call for artists. They submitted it and we said, okay, we need 1, a rendering of what you're going to paint, and 2, an interpretation in English of what it is. Turns out, doesn't matter because when an artist writes something in English, I still couldn't understand it. So I would look at it and say, yeah, I like it. So I don't know. I don't even know what it would say. It would be something amazing that represents probably the history of our town without being blatantly saying, look at me, I'm history. So someone who's creative enough to encapsulate what our town represents without it just screaming it. So not a great answer, but that's all I got.
Yeah.
What town are you in, by the way?
I am in Bryan, Texas. So the MSA is Bryan College Station, which is about an hour and a half from Austin, an hour and a half from Houston, and it's the heart of Texas A&M, which is the largest university in the country.
Isn't that the 12th man team?
It is the 12th man, not the team, but all of us former students or alumni are the 12th man, as well as the students. Yep.
How do they do this year? Do you guys know? I know you know.
I have no idea what we're even talking about.
ATM football.
Oh, I don't
Texas.
watch football.
It's like a pigskin, kind of weird shaped ball. They throw it around. It's
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah, I get no references on this, so this is your guys' conversation here.
So is that your hometown?
It is.
Okay, and then born and raised. I know that by doing some research that you've had quite the story of lavish riches, crazy life, but that was kind of dramatically changed. Can you tell that story?
I don't know what you're talking about. But I am 4th generation of Bryan College Station. I think it's 4th generation. I don't know how generations are counted. Is the fresh off the boat generation 0 or 1? I'm not sure. So depending on that.
I think that would be 1.
So if it's 1, then maybe I'm 3. No, 4. If it's 0, then I'm 3. So who the heck knows?
Okay, you're right. Because my mom is from Brazil.
Yes.
And I always say I'm 1st generation American.
Yeah. So then there's 0. Yeah. So I'm 3rd generation, love my town, grew up hearing the stories of when my parents were little about how downtown was amazing. And then it was boarded up my whole life, except for we had the feed store that we went down to there for, a great Mexican food place, and the homeless shelter. And it had lots of loitering. So it was considered not safe to hang around. And so it was just such a different place than it was when my parents grew up. And then I don't know. I go away for 7 years after college. I have heard for my whole life how it's coming back. It's going to be revitalized. And I'm like, you people crazy. Like nothing's going on down there. Nobody's going to be down there. I go away for 7 years, come back. And sure enough, there are like seeds of things changing. And so I fell in love with it. And it took us a long path to get here, but that's how we ended up saying, let's make it really cool and different and not look like every other freaking town that you go to.
So what I was bringing up is I remember hearing a story. Was it on Bryan Turner's podcast or something? But it was like your mom had a Corvette.
Oh,
and you were talking about being spoiled and the life that you lived,
totally.
and then that final ride. I mean, can you tell that?
Yes.
I thought that was really impactful to listen.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so my parents were both in real estate growing up. And we had highs and lows. It was through the 80s is when I grew up, in early 90s. And there were boom times. And when there were boom times, my parents made a ton of money. They spoiled us rotten and they bought us whatever we wanted and themselves whatever they wanted. And so we had booms and busts. So in the late 80s was a savings and loan crisis. And that pretty much decimated our town for real estate. So we went through bankruptcy. Well, my parents had a Jeep Wrangler. My mom had a Stingray Corvette with the T-top and the maroon, because, we're Aggie, so everything has to be maroon, the maroon leather. And we were just small kids. She loaded us up in that car, and we went like for a joyride. And we must have gone hundreds of miles an hour. And then as we came back up our long driveway, because we live in the country, my dad was tapping his toe in disapproval. Well, what I soon learned is that was the last joyride before the car was going to get repossessed right before bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And so it definitely had a lasting impact on me. The other thing is I was riding the bus home from school and there was like a kind of a junkyard. And our ski boat was sitting in that junkyard. And I remember coming home and being like, Mom, like, why did those people have our ski boat? And just the fact that it was on my path home was, weird enough. But I was like, why do they have our ski boat? But again, it had been repoed and I guess the bank sold it to them. And so I saw people getting rich in our town and I saw us getting poor. So I became really fascinated about money and how it works. Even though I couldn't have put words around that at the time, I definitely became fascinated with money and why some people were getting rich and we were getting poor. But the one thing I knew is no way in hell did I want to do real estate because those highs and lows were just so stressful. Yeah. Not as a kid, because my parents made sure we were shielded from it and spoiled rotten, but you could just feel their tension and the stress that they had because of it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is like, how did that affect your like risk aversion getting started and then getting bigger and bigger too?
I definitely believe, it depends on who you ask, I am risk adverse. So I'm super conservative, kind of stick to my knitting. Now, my mom is now my business partner. And if you were to ask her, she would say I'm risky. So it totally depends on your perspective. But the one thing that it was much later as I learned and process information, but real estate is a cycle and you cannot fight the cycle. Your brilliance, your strategy is not going to overcome basically market forces. So you have to prepare yourself for when the market forces come. And that's why I say we're conservative, because we need a fallback plan, but ultimately the ultimate fallback plan of any entrepreneurial endeavor is bankruptcy. Yeah. And the government created bankruptcy for entrepreneurs to take outsized risk that otherwise does not make any sense. And they basically say, if you do it and you're successful, great, you get the rewards. But if you do it and you're not successful, we will help you unwind it. And so it doesn't just sink you from taking that risk. And so once I realized that and was able to verbalize that, it just puts everything in perspective of what the highs can be and what the lows can be so that you're not surprised by what's going to happen in the middle of it.
I tell you what, I never thought of bankruptcy that way.
That's a crazy perspective. I love it.
It's smart, though. I mean, it's definitely a way to put it. You mentioned the business that you have with your mom. Is that Renovation Wranglers?
Yes.
And okay, so were you nervous, like getting into a partnership with your parents after kind of seeing the bankruptcy, the past? Like, how did that play a role in creating this partnership?
So it was a long time after that because I went to college because my parents I'm the first one in my family that's graduated from college. And that was like my choice. I knew that's what I wanted to do because I need to get the heck out of this town and, away from all this craziness. So I was super focused on going to school, getting a job, and like going into the corporate world. And I totally did that and kind of basically made it on my own and then came back. And when I was working back in my hometown, and then I was like, hey, I've been reading all this stuff on real estate. So the thing that pivoted is I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And it gave me a lot of words for things that I'd always felt. But the one thing that it really taught me was that my parents' demise in real estate was not because of real estate. They had come from very poor backgrounds and they made a lot of money, and they basically just totally outpaced their financial education. And so bankruptcy was just a big part of that education. They're both actually great learners, great entrepreneurs, and really good with money. They just, it was just a lesson learned. So I had zero concern about going into business with my mom. I just figured she wouldn't go into business with me. So I had to come up and do research and put all the numbers together and presented it to her. And all I wanted to do was just buy some cash flowing real estate so that it would be passive income and that one day we would just retire rich off of it. I mean, that's how it all started.
So I'm in business with my mother right now. And so
your mom's awesome.
She's a fun one. And she was working a corporate job for 30 years in the building industry. And I was like, and they were just beating her to death, 80, 90-hour weeks. I remember her going to work at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning to go fill job sheets up for the contractors she's working at. And they weren't paying her overtime. And the benefits were not that great. And I'm like, you're burning yourself out. You're getting extremely overweight. At one point, she was bodybuilding, and it was the biggest I've ever seen her. I'm like, and she was unhappy. And I'm like, get your real estate license. I'll give you all my leads. You do all my transactions for me because I'm working on other stuff. We'll split everything 50-50. And she's a way better agent than I am. She communicates way better with all of her. She's on it and she's doing marketing, advertising, so on. It was a hard transition going in because I had to be so hands-on with the training side of it. So we had a lot of frustrations. I'm like, come on, Mom, it's a computer. Figure this out. But she just, the tech savvy side took some while, but now it's been, 3-4 years, and it's, my life is so much easier because of that.
Yeah.
It has been game changing.
Yeah. And I work with my husband very closely too. So that kind of interfamilial business relationship, how do you guys deal with that? Has it always been hunky dory?
Yeah. So it works for us because for one, we totally respect each other. My mom is so brilliant at the things that she's really good at, and I don't question that. And I really take her viewpoints into consideration. I mean, she went through the cycle. But I also am able to stretch her a little bit because she's ultra conservative, right? That's why she considers me risky. And then she lets me run with the underwriting and kind of the financial side of it. And I mean, her response always is, oh my God, where are we going to get the money? I know when I say, hey mom, want to buy this land and do this, where are we going to get the money? I already know that's going to be her response. And then, when I lay out the path, she totally trusts that we can do it. So from that point, the reason it works is because we trust each other for what we're good at. Now, it doesn't always look very good when you're in the middle of it. The thing that she's really good at is knowing I love my own ideas, and she raised me as the youngest spoiled child. So she knows how to handle me. She makes her ideas sound like mine. I know I'm being manipulated, and I totally accept it. And when I really with anyone, and Megan can probably attest to this, the way that I have a conversation with people is a little dysfunctional. I want to argue with you. If I want to insult you, I want to kind of throw out well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, whether I think it or not, to get you to respond, because I'm kind of I don't know how to socialize normally. So I just pull the pin out of the grenade, I roll it into the room and kind of let it blow up. And if we're having a conflict, what some people would say conversation, I feel like you're passionate about what you're saying, I'm passionate about what I'm saying, and then we can get to a resolution. So I do that a lot with my mom, and she lets that happen. But I am sure from someone on the outside, they would think that I do not respect my mom, but it's because I'm always just trying to push everyone to the brink of really being passionate about what they believe. And so it doesn't always feel hunky-dory, but in my perspective, it's great.
Our goal today is to find something that we can throw out there and drop the pin on to get her upset, and then see the reaction.
She'll do it. She'll do it for us. Okay, Katie, like, she's my spirit animal. Like, we are both the same kind of abrasive, just like boom, mic drop, and just put that right there and let it explode.
Did she do this to you already?
Oh my God, yeah. And then so Katie and I, we've hung out quite a bit, like at different masterminds, different events, all the things. You're also like a kind of a conference junkie, like I am. Extreme
Totally.
FOMO. And every time Katie is like pissing somebody off in the room, I'm like, oh my God, Katie's doing it again. And I'm just eating popcorn on the sidelines.
Where does that come from?
Gosh, it's a really good question. My mom is a really nice person, so it has to come from my dad. But I don't know. I don't have great interpersonal skills, and it frustrates me. And rather, like, I believe keeping all of those emotions suppressed. So I'm totally against therapy. So it just bubbles up in different ways. And so this just naturally bubbles up and explodes that way. It was probably toughest on my marriage out of any of the relationships to understand that was the dynamic. Until we're arguing, then we haven't actually had a conversation. And so I've tried to dial it back a little bit. But what I love about it, like in a mastermind or in group setting, is I believe a person can't have 100 friends. As a matter of fact, I feel like they can basically have 5 close friends, because friendships are a lot of work and it's a lot of two-way interaction. So I like to repel the people that would just be nice to me because it's the polite thing to do, and draw toward me the people who are going to challenge me and push me to be better and let me push them to be better. And so by doing it, it just creates a faster way to get to what the end result's probably going to be anyway.
So I time block in my calendar 3 to 5 every day to spend some time with somebody that I consider a friend. And so I block myself at the cigar bar. And I'm like, hey, if you want to hang out, have a one-on-one, or if you quote unquote want to pick my brain, I'll be there 3 to 5. You can buy me an old fashioned. I'll have a cigar, and we'll talk. And that's how I'm able to actually maintain relationships. That because I feel like it's impossible to maintain. And as long as I can, get together with somebody that's in my circle once or twice a year on a personal, that can keep a friendship, but not a best friend. You know what I mean? But I agree with you. My best friend circle is very tight. I consider Megan a friend, and we'll probably only have one of these conversations every year or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
but you can pick it right off where you're at. You know that you can trust what she's going to say. She's not going to sugarcoat it, and you're not going to be like, so how's the weather in your town at the beginning of every conversation, which nobody even freaking cares.
You know what her response would be? Oh, I'm in Maui right now. Let me show you a picture. Because that's what I get all the time.
Don't be
Was that just
jealous.
last week you did that to me?
Yeah. It got cold. I was like, I'm out. I'm going to Maui.
Okay, so I really want to deep dive into you guys doing these, going to all these events. Like, how did you guys meet at the events? What events are you guys picking, and why? What are you guys getting out of it? I'm going to address this to both of you.
Oh, you want to go first?
Sure. So as you can imagine, my mom, because of what I've told you, is a fiercely independent woman. The lady thinks that she should do everything herself. If we need plumbing, she can run the plumbing. She can figure anything out. I'm actually just the opposite. I'm like, not that good at it. Don't want to be that good at it. Let's hire someone. So we're different in that way. But ingrained in my core is be fiercely independent. And if it's something you put your mind to, you'll do it better than anyone else. And that has served me to a fault, because for 10 years in real estate investing, I read all the books and the podcasts, but I would not share with people what was going on in my real life. Like, that felt, one, like oversharing, and two, I just didn't have that level of trust with most people. And then COVID hit. And I had lots of time of just walking and thinking on my own, and realized for years I had blamed not knowing what to do next or created that as an excuse not to get to where I wanted to go. I just didn't know. And I was like, one day I'll come across the right person, like it'll all work out. And in COVID, I realized I was just using that as an excuse. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? This next year for 12 months, I'm going to say yes to everything. Because some people have a hard time saying no. Turns out I'm really good at saying no. I have a hard time saying yes and pushing myself outside the comfort zone. So it's like every opportunity that comes up, I'm going to say yes to. I'm going to do it for 12 months. And then at the end of the 12 months, I'll reassess whether or not I want to re-up and continue to do it. So that year, actually within 48 hours, I think Brandon sent out like a story on Instagram for that first Maui mastermind. And I was like, okay, I said yes. And I was like, don't look at the price. Don't look at all the things that are going to make me nervous, right? I'm just going to say yes. And then I joined Women's Go Abundance and like everything that came. I bet I joined 5 things that year. I just said yes to everything. And the one thing that was the highest return on investment was totally that Maui mastermind. And not just for the mastermind, which was amazing in and of itself, but then we created groups afterwards to stay connected. And then we still get together once a year, even outside of the formal mastermind. And so that's kind of, I went from, I'm not joining a sorority because I don't pay for friends to, hey, take me. I'll pay for any friend if I think it's going to be a good benefit. But it took about 15 years to get to that point. I'm just so mad I didn't do that sooner.
I do want to hear this from you too, but am I wrong to say this? You are a natural extrovert? but I mean, maybe you were an extrovert, but the way you speak on the mic, it's totally like an introvert. And so I'm confused because the story you tell is like, I'm hidden. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to talk. But right now, like, it seems like you're just natural and glowing on the mic. Like, you're like, give me more. So was there a pivot or what am I reading this wrong or tell me?
I'm complicated. I would say I am an extroverted introvert.
Okay.
So I am completely drained by being in public and socializing. And like I said, I'm socially awkward. So I hate networking with people I don't know because the whole roll the grenade in the room, that's the only way I know how to communicate. And it causes a lot of stress. And so whenever, even at like those masterminds, like I will have to get away and just like sleep for 10 hours straight to recover because it totally drains me. But I also have a little bit of Chandler in me from Friends where once the light is turned on, I'll say something stupid or funny or like just basically project to, I don't know, be fun and enjoy the group. But it's definitely draining on me.
Okay. I mean, because I didn't know what I was reading there, and you just explained it. So thank you for that. Okay, Megan, events, conferences that you've attended, most impactful in your life, ones that you'll never miss.
Yeah, probably that Maui Mastermind. Like I started the same year you started. I think the first year that they did it. Although we were in different groups, we weren't.
Yeah, we were back to back.
Yeah, and man, life changing. I was at a point where I was like the coolest person in Lincoln, I felt like, but like you're just a big fish in a little pond and you're not that tight. And I was so burnt out and so like in my business all the time and not growing my business, working on my business. And saw that same story, applied for it, got into it. And that was just so life changing. Like my life now is 100% different. I can step away and move to Maui for a year and have my flipping business, my staging business, all of those things run without me, where I was just like so burnt out before. But those connections of, Katie and the entire group and Brandon and all of those, like it's life changing. I can look back and say, okay, I spent $6,000 on that first one. And before it even started, I'm sitting there talking to Indar at the bar. And he tells me one little nugget, and I'm like, that just saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars because he told me about cost segregation and bonus depreciation, where I'm paying taxes on all the flips that I do. And I'm like, boom, I could leave right now and I would get my return on investment. But, it's still fun to hang out the whole time.
I tell you what, I from the outside looking in, I know that that's impactful because like going to the BP conferences, meeting the people in your guys' circle. And then there's so many of those people that we've had on the podcast, even and interviewed just because of those introductions. And I'm just blown away every time I meet somebody that attended one of those first 2 masterminds. Everybody seems that they're killing it.
Yeah.
So what, to kind of conclude the conferences, what conferences are you guys attending this year?
Let's see. I'm going
to Tahoe.
Yeah, we're both going to Tahoe, which is a Maui mastermind in Tahoe.
Okay.
I'm speaking at the Level Up conference, so I'm going to that, which is the day before Tahoe.
Where's that at?
Phoenix. And then I'll probably go to Limitless. I'm going to the REI Summit, which is in Austin in June.
Are you speaking at that one? I'm going and speaking too.
I saw you were speaking. I'm not. I spoke last year. They didn't invite me back, and I thought I did a pretty awesome job. So
You
we'll
dropped
talk about
dropped too many grenades.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that in Maui. That grenade's going to blow up big, or in Tahoe. And then, the Small Business Development Conference is in San Luis Obispo, California in June. And so I'm doing that one too. So those are the conferences that I've committed to so far.
That is a lot.
Hopefully no more.
Katie says yes to all of them.
I do. Hopefully no
Is
more.
the San Luis Obispo one the developing one?
Yep. It's a small scale development forum, and it's just like 65 to 80 people, and they all are like nerdy downtown developers. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's a cool one. I love those smaller format ones. Like when you go to BPCon, that's like 1,000 people. You're like, hey, my name's Megan. I flip houses. And they're like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'm Joe. I flip houses too. And you're like, bye. But when you're like in a group of 30 or 60, like you can get so much deeper with people.
Totally. The only reason I go to BPCon anymore, and I didn't go when it was in Mexico, I do LobbyCon.
I didn't do Mexico either.
Yeah.
That's the only one I haven't been to.
Yeah, I don't buy the ticket. I just do LobbyCon because I'm only going to connect with the people that I know because they'll all come to that one place, although it's getting less and less every year. But historically, they had all come to that one place. So we'll see this year if I go. But like, if you're going to a conference for the content, yeah, probably not ready for a mastermind because the reality is it's the people and the connections. And if you think someone from a stage that also has a podcast and a book and everything else that you've heard is going to say something brilliant, like you're probably going to feel like you overpaid when you leave because you're not going to get that much value from it. It's definitely about being strategic and building relationships while you're there.
Wow, that's impactful because the last handful of conferences that I've been to, I'm like, man, I'm not really getting much other presenters because I remember that first BP I went to, and I'm like, man, this everything was just like absorbing, and I was like, my notebook, every page was filled out. It was like, speaking of Brandon, it was the first time I ever met Brandon. I'm like, hey, Brandon, I got this new podcast I'm launching, and I'm like, on episode 10, what do you think? He's like, change the name, change this, change that. And I was like, because I went right up to him in the front of the room. I'm like, dude, thank you. and we did. We renamed it and we changed everything. And I got so much out of that. But then thereafter, the only benefit I was getting out of attending the conferences from that point on was the people I was meeting. And I would set very specific goals. I'm like, hey, my goal this time is to learn. The first one was podcasting. So I attended everything to do with podcasting, anybody doing podcasting. The second one, I was like, hey, I need to learn more about short-term midterms because I'm like, I'm going down this road. I know I can do better. So I only attended stuff on that. But also I went through and I probably recruited 25, 30 people to be on the podcast. And we brought the crew down and we did the video shorts and the interviews in the hallways. So we got a lot out of it. But I just find I have to, if I don't have a very specific goal of what I want to learn out of that specific meeting, then I'm not getting anything out of it. And I love the idea of just attending and not getting the tickets necessarily, because that's brilliant.
You still get all the gold.
Yes.
It's so hard from a speaker perspective too. Like if you only have whatever, you have like 30, 40 minutes, 10 of it is taken up by like who you are and why should they even listen. And then you can't really get into the nuts and bolts of everything. And then half of the people in the room, it doesn't apply to anyways. Half of them are, either too new or too experienced that what you're saying isn't that important. So it's like, it's not about the content. It's about the connections. What I like to do is go like every person I meet there, what do they do? How can I help them? And how could they potentially help me? And just keep like a kind of a running total of that. And that seems so transactional. I'm probably a little bit damaged like you, Katie, of just not having friends and not really fully understanding what that means to be a good friend. But like at least be transactional about it in that, hey, I've heard you talk about it on a webinar. You're like, oh, you're going to be developing it in this town. I know someone that does this thing in that town. And you're able to put those connections together and be the connector and be able to hand opportunities to people just because you know so many people.
Yeah, totally. I have a note on my phone and it's called my people note. And so if something happens and I'm like, oh, that's intriguing or that's what they're in, I keep it. So then when I see them again, I can pull it up and remember what we talked about. Or when I'm trying to make a connection, I have it all in one place. Yeah. I don't call that transactional. I call that strategic.
Mm-hmm. Strategic networking. Love it.
Can you give us a little bit of background of what you were doing in the early years? Like what career, what were you doing with corporate finance and how that led into real estate?
Yeah. So when I graduated from college, it was a perfect time. Everybody, if you could breathe, like they were hiring. It was in 99. And so I went to work for Wells Fargo Bank in their wholesale commercial division, which basically meant that I learned to underwrite credits for companies that had between 10 and 100 million in revenue a year. these were not like real estate clients. It was all owner occupied real estate. It was more like working capital. And so it was awesome. Like the training was amazing. I got to meet with CFOs and ask them about money because I grew up that was rude. And whenever I tried to do it with people, they confirmed that was not an appropriate conversation. So it was so awesome to have the forum, and that was the expectation. And it was so cool to see companies in the same business, see their financials and why some of them were successful and some weren't. So it was awesome. The people I worked with were amazing. They were all about self-development. It was a great 7 years of my life, taught me credit underwriting, how to read balance sheets and income statements and assess risk and all of that. But I had my son, and this is how I had my son. My husband came to me and said, he's a working cowboy, by the way.
I saw pictures of him, cowboy hat, big mustache.
Yep, he's quintessential.
I'd really like to meet him.
Yeah. So at the time he had a job in the cattle magazine world. And he said, look, I'll quit my job if you just let us have a kid. And I was like, okay, but this kid is not going to screw up my career. And so reluctantly, because I didn't really like kids. I didn't know if I'd like my own. So reluctantly, we had our first son like right away, much to my husband's dismay. Boom, we're pregnant.
And what year is this?
This was in 2004. So
okay.
We had him in 2005. And so we had my son, and turns out, dude, I loved it. I loved the kid, but I worked so many hours. And so I would leave before he woke up, and I would get home after he was in bed. Mm-hmm. And I was on the phone with my husband, and he said, oh my God, Sam just took his first steps. And at least I was on the phone and got to experience it that way. But at that moment, I was like, what am I doing? And so that weekend, we were taking a trip out to a horse show. And I said, hey, because my husband's like, if you'll just stay awake, like at least till we get to the edge of the county, because I use that as my sleeping time. And so I was like, okay, but if we're going to do that, we're going to do family planning and goal setting. And he was like, just go to sleep. I'm like, no, I'm excited about it now. And so I was like, okay, 10 years, where do we want to be? 5 years, where do we want to be? 1 year, where do we want to be? And I was like, oh my God, I am building a life I don't even want. So that next week I went in, quit my job, moved back to my hometown. Like it happened so fast. And I went to work for a startup bank in my hometown as the chief credit officer. That bank was an effing disaster. And looking back on it, all the signs were there. They brought me in and interviewed me after the bank was closed. So none of the employees were there. And then basically the bank got shut down and reissued to a new bank by the FDIC. So I was there for I was there for 18 months and learned way more than I did in the 7 years at Wells Fargo. Because one of the things I said is I want to understand like the business side. So I want to be in the executive meetings, and the chairman of the board and the president of the bank literally would have verbal fights with each other and threaten to beat each other up. And I could remember like looking at my feet going, this is so embarrassing. And then I was like, what am I embarrassed about? Like, get the popcorn, look up and enjoy the show. And so it was a completely dysfunctional experience, but I was like, oh my gosh, like God, I felt so like we were doing the right thing. And then I'm thrown into this horrible experience. And I'm like, we're trying to buy a house and I don't know if I'm going to have a job, and how do I get out of here? And I'm in a relatively small town. So I did not want to tell people I was looking for a job because I wanted to control how and when I exited the bank. Mm-hmm. So I told just a couple of customers of mine and said, hey, if you know of anything that comes up. And so from there, one of them said, I don't know what you do for us, but we'd love to have you join our team. And so a couple of months later, we kind of figured it out. And I went to work for a startup company that took care of people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I was like, what am I going to do? And he's like, I don't know. I do this real estate thing where we build the buildings and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, I'll try it. And so that's how I got out of banking and into real estate, because I would pick the market, oversee the construction, and get it basically licensed and then turn it over to them for the operations.
I can really relate on a work-life, family-life balance, because I know personally when I was working for a basement foundation company called Basement Systems for about 4 years. And I remember we had our first child during that time frame. And every third or fourth week, sometimes more, I was gone for a whole week because I had a 4-state territory: Nebraska, Missouri, South Dakota, Iowa. And I remember coming home, and I've said this over and over again, but I remember coming home and it got to a point where my son wasn't running to me as fast as he used to. It wasn't as important that I was coming home because he was becoming a complete mama's boy, which he is now. And and I was like, okay, there was a job offer and running a marketing and advertising for a real estate company in town. And I was like, okay, there's an opportunity here. It was, $60,000 less than what I was making, but I was like, this is what's important.
Yeah. Well, when I went to work for that company, I took a 35% pay cut, but it was the first job I ever took that it wasn't based on money or where I could go. It was totally based on what I can learn. And both of these guys were entrepreneurs. And I still had this burning desire inside of me to be one. But now that I've been a banker, I'm only more conservative. I'm definitely not less conservative. And I was like, I have to be around people that can push me and show me how to do it. So I too took a huge pay cut and went to work for them. Best thing I ever did.
Yeah. So after you going to work for them, how did you pivot into actually doing real estate for yourself out of the employee thing?
Yeah. So 7 years into that journey, well, along the way in 2010, so I went to work there in 2008, which is when the meltdown happened. I went right before the meltdown. Thank you, Lord, for getting me out of banking before the 2008 meltdown. So I was working for them in 2008. And then in 2010, that's when I convinced my mom to start buying some old fourplexes and renting them out. So I was doing that on the side. My job with them was remote. So I just traveled to the town that we were working in. So I had lots of flexibility to be able to do that. And we did that for 7 years. And the deal was one, if they were ever going to sell or get rid of me, I needed them to tell me because my husband was a working cowboy and I was the breadwinner and we had a kid and I didn't want to be surprised by it. So that was one agreement. And then the second one was I wanted to learn, all that I could while I was there outside of just that job. So they were super supportive and helping me figure out how to do credit underwriting and all of that stuff. So I was able to learn that on the side. Well, 7 years in, I was convinced they hardly worked in the job at all. It was just passive income to them. They were never going to sell it, but we weren't growing very fast and I was super bored. But I got this quasi equity if I stayed, and vested out of all of these projects. And he came to me one day and he goes, I have some really bad news. I'm like, what? And he goes, we're going to sell. I'm like, thank you, Jesus, because that rushed all my vesting up. And so when my bonus was basically 1 year salary. So I said, this is my chance. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to set it up in a banking account. I'm going to pay me just like I have been on my income every 2 weeks. And at the end of the year, if I'm out of money, I'll go get a job. And so it let me be not very risky, but have the confidence to take the leap. And so that was in 2000 and the beginning of 15 is when they sold it. So it's been 10 years later and I haven't had to go back to work yet. But if I do, I'm I'll be way worse of an employee now. I thought I was not employable then. I'm really not now, but I'm willing to do it if I have to.
That's awesome.
You guys were talking about, with the kids and everything. Now that you guys have both, all of us, I should say, now that you're not having that traditional W-2 and being the fact that, family is part of the reason that we're doing what we're doing, right? Are you guys more involved in doing things with your kids that you wouldn't be able to do when you had a W-2?
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm an empty nester now. So my youngest, who is my son, because we adopted my daughter later in life and she was older than my son. So he went from the only child to the youngest son. So the timeline gets so messed up when I try and tell this story without the whole story and people going, what? But so my youngest, who was my son, firstborn, he just turned 19 and chose to go real estate and not into college. And my daughter is in college. So we're basically empty nesters at this point. But I mean, we went to all their events. We went to all their volleyball games and their basketball games and everything that they were involved in. And they went to all of our stuff. So one thing that we do a little different in our family, it's probably more like Megan, is we aren't how today will we create this amazing experience for our child so that we know they have a wonderful childhood. It's we spend a lot of time together and you do whatever we're doing. You're so fortunate that we're all blessed to be in a family that's able to do things. And one of those things we do is work our ass off. So today, kids, you're going to put together 18 lofts of kitchen cabinets and that's your job. And so they've been very involved in the business and we've been able to do lots of stuff with them and they've done lots of stuff with us. And so we've got to spend a lot of time together. So far, they still like spending time with us. We'll see if that holds up.
It's so cool too, because I know Sam, I know your son, and he's kind of in the first deal program. I get to see him front seat view of him buying his first house, or I guess he had a property before that was a rental, and then now buying this next house and tearing it down, completely redeveloping, building 4 townhouses, and he's what, 20, 19?
Just turned 20 last week.
Yeah, it's insane. And like, what do you do? Because I got little kids still, they're moldable. What do you do to them to make them not go like, you work too much in real estate and I hate this and I don't want to do real estate, but I want to lean in and do it with you?
Yeah, it's hard because I won't say that what we did was right or that it would work all the time, but I strongly believe in brainwashing. So from when he was an infant and then all the way through when we adopted my daughter and her too, if no one's talking in the car, I was always playing Rich Dad Poor Dad. If someone wanted to talk, I'd turn it off. We'd have a conversation. And then it went to Richest Man in Babylon. So it was always playing in the background. And it just created questions. But when I realized it was working is I got a letter from the teacher at daycare. So he would have been like 5 that said, hey, I see Sam's birthday's coming up. He talked to us about it today in class, and I learned more about assets and liabilities than I have ever learned before. So I asked him, like, what did you do? Well, he wanted to have his birthday party at a bounce house, and his birthday's in February. It's right next to Toys R Us. Very good location, by the way. So we had just been there for Christmas, right? And he's like, that's where I'm having my birthday. And then they shut down between Christmas and February. And he was destroyed by it, right? And so we had a whole conversation about, well, they're a business and businesses have to make money, but then they have expenses. So what happened is I had to pay utilities and people to be there to clean the bounce houses and watch the kids. And that was more than the money that they were making. So it started as an asset, but their liabilities got too high. And so they had to close. It has nothing to do with you. So apparently he did that with his class. He told them that's why he wasn't able to have his birthday there. But everything we do is a story about it. So like when we went to, Six Flags, we would say, okay, so where's the income coming from and where are the expenses? And just looking at everything through that lens. I didn't know if he would do real estate or my daughter, but the one thing I wanted them to know, if they wanted to live under a bridge in a cardboard house, totally fine. I let them smell cardboard wet, just so they would know. But my goal was I did not want them to be there and not know what sacrifices or what they were giving up. Because I felt like without having the financial knowledge when I was a kid, I found out later and I would have redone a lot of things a lot earlier had I had that education. So my goal was just to give them the education and let them choose to do what they want with it. But everything in life can be talked about from a business perspective, and it just gets them thinking. He wanted to open a business. We did. He's probably opened 5 businesses. My daughter's opened a couple of businesses, and we just support them wholly on that. I would way more lose money on that than on some freaking club volleyball, that I'm going to pay thousands of dollars for them to go and do. So I just tried to support them in any spark of interest they had around entrepreneurship.
I just had to play for club volleyball this week, so I get it.
And the trips are great. The memories are fun. The cost is stupid.
Yes. I totally get that, and I agree with it on the kids too, because I keep the podcast running in the background. If I'm listening book, I leave it on. Sometimes it brings questions, sometimes it doesn't. But because Dad's on the podcast, my kids are 7 and 11. And I started late, but they listen to that. They think it's fun, especially if I bring them up. So if they hear this section I mentioned, Carson or Skylar, they'll start giggling in the back.
I love that.
Okay, so you guys started buying rentals, flipping houses. At some point, you made a huge transition to, okay, I want to just tear them down and rebuild. So what led to that decision?
So we started buying low-income fourplexes so that we could have government paychecks. Brilliant, right? So we had 3 of them really fast, 2 more under contract, and realized we hated it. We liked fixing up the fourplexes. We hated everything past that point. So we pivoted. We sold them all, and then we started flipping houses, and we loved flipping houses. Now, because I'm conservative and my mom is conservative, the rule of thumb was if we couldn't sell the flip when it was done, it had to break even on a 30-year mortgage as a rental. So that threw out all the high-end flips, and it just kept pushing us more and more towards downtown in the really rough houses. But they were all the old character houses with the beautiful, accents and stuff. So we would fix them up, leave the old character, and people loved them. And our egos grew. We were like, aren't we amazing? We're really good at this. But we knew real estate was a cycle, and at some point flipping wouldn't work. And I got my mom into this on this dream of passive income. And we just created a job for ourselves. We loved the job and it was creating big pops of cash, but we were just putting it back into the next flip. And when that stopped, what was going to happen? And then COVID happened. And for, at least 3 weeks, we were like, what? Like this whole thing could just burn up in an instant. And we've done nothing to prepare ourselves. And that's what led to I've got to figure this out and quit using it as an excuse that I don't know what to do next, to figure out how to do something that we love and build assets that we actually want to have. So we sat down and had a conversation and said, if we had to own real estate long term, what do we want and what do we not want? And it basically came down to, we want to still create and build and have things when people come to town, we're super excited to show them. Like if my family came to town, I'm not going to drive them by some old HUD fourplex and be like, we own that, right? But when they come to downtown, I'm like, yeah, let's walk. We'll have coffee. Oh, that's our apartment building we built. Like it's super exciting to show them. So we wanted assets that we liked. They had to cash flow and help offset some of that freaking flipping income that we were creating and paying absorbent amount in taxes. So it was very strategic. So we just started Googling I didn't even know the right words, but development and how do you do it and who's doing it? And we can find anything. We found nothing. So we just started buying stuff that had a plan B exit. So we bought these 3 little lots, these 3 little houses on it that were definitely the worst houses, a couple of blocks from downtown that were low income housing. And our plan was demo them and build like townhomes there. But if for some reason, since we didn't know anything, if we couldn't build townhomes, we'd just sell them to some investor that wanted low income housing. So maybe we break even, maybe we lose a little bit. In the meantime, it cash flows and breaks even. So we just started finding ways to learn without putting everything at risk.
How much did you learn when you were getting started? Because I was doing some investigating on some of your first deals, and it looked like you were buying some like condemned houses. One of the houses was your 504 house, the greenhouse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And every project I touched looked just like that.
Yeah.
And my mentality when I bought those houses was, if it needs everything, then it's easier for me to put a budget on it because I can just budget every single thing it needs, right? And then if something isn't needed, then I'm winning instead of buying something that I don't think needs everything. It needs plumbing or something that I'm losing.
Totally.
But
Everything was like a massive remodel.
It is. You're doing new construction.
Yes, in an old house. And that's what we'd say. When we're done, you have a new house with old bones and character. And if you just plan your numbers that way, it works. But for us on the development side, we didn't I'll tell you how little we knew. So those lots we bought when we went and met with the city to share our vision that obviously they were going to be amazed by. They said, hey, do you know those lots don't meet city standards anymore? So if you tear those houses down, they're too small and you can't build back on them. And we're like, no, we did not. They're saying, so you want to build townhomes? Yep. Do you know that townhomes aren't allowed by zoning there? No, we did not. And then they said, and you're wanting to build 5 20-foot wide townhomes? I was like, yes, sir. And he goes, do you know the minimum width is 25 foot? I'm like, dude, with all the grace and professionalism I could muster up, I just looked him in the eyes. I was like, well, that's stupid. I mean, that was my level of knowledge and professionalism when we started. But the one thing that happened is he said, you know what? We kind of think that's stupid too. You're building exactly what we want, what we've laid out in our comprehensive plan. So we're going to help you be successful. So for us, dumb luck, it worked out, but we learned now you can know that before you buy the property. We were just fortunate enough to find out. I mean, basically, we were like, we're flipping all around here. We could be in the heart of downtown. People want them because they want our flips that are outside of downtown. This is even more walkable. So we knew people were going to want the product that we produced. It never occurred to us to think about checking in with the city to see if they would or wouldn't want it. That never even occurred to us that there would be so many limitations. And I did a skinny version of development with that startup company, but I'm so dumb. I didn't even connect all the dots. And we were buying commercial property that was already zoned that way. So all of the kind of development was taken out of it, but I didn't even make the connection about I should go meet with the city and see if they're okay with this. I just assumed we were building something amazing that it would just all work out. And it did, but it could have gone way differently. But if it did, we'd have sold those houses to a low-income landlord. So that's how we protected ourselves while we were learning.
Yeah. I feel like the city can just make or break a deal like that too. If in a totally different city, they would have been like, nope, sorry, sucks to suck. And then you're just out, right?
Yeah. And if I had been 5 blocks over asking for the same thing, they would have said, no, we're not going to let you build dense townhomes in that neighborhood. So it was just that we were building what they wanted, where they wanted. They weren't like, oh, you cute little girls, we want y'all to be successful. You're so ignorant. We're going to help you. No, we were building what they wanted, where they wanted. And that's why it worked. And you have to find the cities where you're able to build what they want, where they want, and it's something you want to build. And that's where it's still hard, because working with the city, they just have a whole different mindset. They get their W-2 job regardless of timeline and regardless of if they say yes or no. You're an entrepreneur trying to freaking feed your family. So every delay they cause, like, it's just a conflict of interest from the beginning. So it's never easy, but it's totally doable if you're both pulling in the same direction.
One thing I really love about doing renovations that are downtown or really close to downtown is you can put a little bit more creative edge on those properties and do some fun, swanky stuff. It's expected. And I find, like, because I do Airbnb, so I find the more fun, swanky, colorful, trying to throw something in there you don't see, it attracts so much more attention. With your projects you've done there, are you guys throwing your own like pizzazz on it? I know you're doing murals, because I've seen lots of cool murals, but what are you guys doing to put your own personal touches on these?
So we actually had Texas A&M. I worked in the Real Estate Research Center when I was in college, so I got to leverage that and went to one of the researchers and said, hey, we need to find out like what people who rent and live in downtown actually want. And he said, if you let us publish it, we'll do a study across the state. We'll find similar cities in demographic size with universities. We'll go and basically research, talk to the people and find out. And what we learned basically confirmed what we believed, which is people who live downtown want it to be a reflection of who they are. And people who live downtown are kind of edgy, funky. Yeah. So it gave us permission. If we were to build a 3x5 windowed sheetrock white box with tumbler brick and vinyl plank flooring, we would not rent those in downtown. Like, it needs, when they walk in, it needs to elicit a reaction. Either this is like, when are you going to be done? Because this looks horrible. Or, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. So everything we do, we try and polarize whatever people think when they walk in. The challenge is it still has to make money. So for every project, we will pick what is the funky, unique approach on this project. We go all in on that. And then everything else around that has to be pretty standard and basic. But being downtown, we don't have to build amenities. We don't have to build a bunch of parking because we have no parking requirements. Downtown is the amenity. So we're able to maximize every square foot of that property to produce income. I don't have to have a gym. There is a gym downtown. I don't need a restaurant or, any of that extra stuff, because that is what downtown is providing.
Whenever I'm advising as a real estate agent, an investor that's doing a flip, and maybe you doing your own version of this, the one thing I always tell each one of them is, I'm like, hey, find the one thing that's extremely memorable about your property, because if it has like an indoor-outdoor fireplace, for instance, that goes on the deck, they're going to think of that as the fireplace house. So you got to give something that's going to be that one memory. And then as you're going and looking at other properties, like, oh, I really like that fireplace house, or I really like the house that had those really rare ceilings, something that you don't see anywhere. And if you just put a little extra budget into one wow factor that is above and beyond a memorable moment in that property, your property will sell because it'll be memorable and it'll stick out above everything else.
Yeah. Also, ugly colored paint and cute color paint, they cost the same. Yeah. So like, why are you guys picking these ugly colors, And so you guys do a good job of like doing those very cute design things. Is it always you that's making that choice, or do you partner with like designers, or how does that work?
Yeah. So I'm really bad at it. My gift is spreadsheets. So it's a challenge for me, but I can find images and say, I like that. I don't like that. That's what I'm really good at. But starting from scratch or blank canvas is so intimidating, which is why I love flips, because it's like you have to build within this parameter, right? Like, how can I maximize with the walls? But when you're like, here's raw land, the world is your oyster, like that stresses me out. My mother is much better at that. But for certain things, we get so far over our skis that we're like, we need help because we don't have confidence in our bold decisions. So in those situations, we have an amazing investor who is a designer that will bring in on those projects to help us with the design, paint colors. And it's Maria Feastrom. And it's what Maria Loves Real Estate, I think, is her handle. Y'all should follow her. She's amazing. But she, like, for one of our projects, it was super basic and it was all hardy siding. And I was so afraid it was going to end up looking like a KB home when we were done. So the one thing that we could do is make the colors so bold that it would create a reaction. And I was scared to death of picking those colors. So that was the first time she came in. She gave us a couple of options and it was perfect. So we painted them this bold. It's like turquoise, orange, and white, super bold. And as the paint was going on, my dad calls me and goes, "Hey, somebody picked the wrong paint color over here at this job. Have you seen it?" And I was like, perfect. That's exactly what we want. We want to repel the people who say that's crazy and bring in the people who say, "Oh, that's funky weird. I can do that." And so some of it is our own. And then some of it, when we're out over our skis, we'll hire Maria for our designer.
That's awesome. Okay. So I could ask you a million questions about redevelopment. How do you do it? All the things about zoning, planning, design, but obviously you have a coaching program that explains all of that. So tell us a little bit about that.
And you guys say it really fun, like rookie redevelopment, like something wanky.
Yeah, I'm going to get you to do our video on the website.
Let's do it.
So I am not a super strong people person. So when the thought of, I got to help people get answers to development, because it was adding a lot of pressure in my life, because people would reach out to me on Instagram and say, "Hey, I have this property in Timbuktu, USA, and I'm thinking about doing this on it. Can I do that? Or what's the highest and best use of this land?" And I'm like, great question. And that's like a 2 to 3 week research project. So I got to where I totally understood, because I was looking for that person when we started. And I did not know any of the answers. And it's not like I want to go and do redevelopment across the country. My competitive advantage is I know my downtown better than anyone. I think I know it better than my city. And so that is my competitive advantage. I don't want to go do that all over the country, but I so believe that America will be way better if we have unique tapestry in each of our towns, and that they don't all just look like the same box town over and over again. So it's like, how do I facilitate and help people to get the answer for themselves? Because the challenge with development, it's not like a rental property where you go, "Okay, I know I'm going to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and this is the rent that I can charge, and these are my operating expenses, and now I understand it, and I'm going to go replicate that 1,000 times." Because no development projects are going to be the same. No jurisdiction is the same, and no jurisdiction is the same twice. So even once you've done it in your town, the next time you do it, they're going to throw a total curveball in there that didn't even apply last time. And so it's like, how do I give the playbook or the roadmap for them to be able to answer the questions, to figure out if they can do what I'm doing in their town? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no. So I created this coaching program that has all the videos and all the questions and who to ask and what you need to do and underwriting spreadsheets. And I put all my building plans out there if people want to use them and see if they'll work and get bids off of them so they understand construction costs in their world. And then we do live weekly calls where I'll do a deal deep dive, or someone else in the program will talk about a project they've done. We have live Q&A, but it is totally to help people facilitate a development project, because there just aren't very many resources out there. And it is not a standard, let's just put it in a book and it'll be done and everybody in the country can figure it out. So that was kind of the genesis of the program. And it's been so amazing. I thought, I don't know what to tell these people. And man, to see people ask amazing questions and actually take action and build really cool things in their town, it's been awesome.
Katie, when you're working with somebody and you probably see something that happens over and over again, what's like a common mistake that a newbie is doing, or somebody even that's even experienced is doing in the redevelopment, that it's a lesson that you're constantly teaching? No matter what happens, you just see it over and over again.
Well, it's really kind of twofold. One is that they think how can I do what you're doing? That's the big question. Can I do what you're doing? And so I have a super easy, here, these are the 4 things to find out if your city actually wants redevelopment. Because if you go ask them, "Hey, do you guys want more housing and more development?" They're all going to say yes. A lot of them are lying. So they're trying to figure out, how do I make this work? And then the other thing that I get that is just the wrong question and the wrong perspective is, "Hey, I either own or want to own this land. What is the highest and best use for it?" And the highest and best use is what you know how to do in an area that you know really well. And they want to know, should I do flex space? Should I do mini storage? Should I build an apartment building? And that's the wrong question. You need to figure out what you're going to be really good at and then go find properties that fit that niche. But people in development always want to do it the other way around. I got this great deal on this land. They don't really know anything on the development side. And they're like, what's the highest and best use? And I'm like, wrong question.
Yeah.
You know, Katie's in construction when you hear that she's podcasting from a construction site. So if you hear those noises, those are drills.
I know. I totally want to tell these guys to freaking leave, but I've been trying to get them here for months, and today's the day they finally decide to show up.
At our last studio, we had that happen. Like it was like we were waiting for these doors to get springs and put on, and because the doors kept on slamming during the podcast, going into the apartment building, and then it was like the day they showed up, they were doing it. It was right outside the door. It was like. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? And then Owen's looking at me, and he's like, Ted, he goes, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, they finally showed up. I can't tell them to leave.
I know. And I can already hear it. If I say, hey guys, you need to leave, then my project manager's going to be calling me. He's like, what the heck? I finally get them there. You told them they had to leave. So I'm like, we're just going to work through it.
No, that's totally fine. All right. So if you're going into development and you're new, the number one question I'm sure you get is like, I don't have the money for it. And a lot of times with normal real estate, like a rental, that 3-2 rental, you can get really good financing options. But what do you do to kind of overcome that? I don't have the money. And then how do I get financing on it?
Yeah. What's amazing to me is lots of people in my program are actually professionals in the industry. They're like commercial brokers. They're architects. They've worked for a development company. They're contractors, but they are so nervous to do their own project. It's almost like they know too much. So they know they don't know everything. And it always is around like the underwriting and the financing. That's the problem. So we structure our deals a lot of different ways. But that very first one where we built those townhomes on those lots, we didn't actually put any money into that. So what we did was we raised the money, the equity we needed from the investors. We did all the work, and then we split the profit 50-50. And that's a great model for like a build to sell because it's short term. There's a clear exit strategy. It's really clean. On the other ones, the developments where they're build to rent, we can do the same thing. We want money in every deal, but let's say we have to raise $500,000. Maybe we put 50 to 100,000 in. We raise the rest. And then the financing comes from just a local regional commercial bank. They're the ones who understand development and understand the market. And then hopefully you've built in equity. So when you're done and you get it reappraised, it should be worth more than even that initial appraisal was. And it should be worth more than what you built it for. So you have built in equity. Now, in the golden days, you just refinanced it, gave everybody their money back, and then it was just annuity and everyone lived happily ever after.
Oh, I miss those days.
I miss those days.
I miss them so much.
No. Today, that's not the reality. Like, it's expensive to do cash out refinance, and the property can only handle so much debt and still cash flow. You cannot optimize it. And in a world with uncertainty, leverage, she's a bitch. She's great on the way up and she is painful on the way down. So minimizing that is important. So there's definitely structures in place to help with development. Unfortunately, the world revolves around, since World War II, we don't have to get into the history, around real estate being a financial product. And small scale development does not fit the financial product model. The financial product is, let's build a 400 to 600 door apartment building that we can get institutional money for. And it's kind of performs like a bond, basically. And small scale development is really hard because you're not doing institutional money. The returns don't look the same. And so you're trying to build a better community, not a better financial product. So it is challenging, but as more and more time goes by, that's why you're talking to those local bankers. They understand it. They understand the market. So that's who you have to focus on when you're trying to get financing.
So, today to make money in this, it's all in the buy, right? Because the interest rates are high, the labor is high, the materials are high. So if you don't buy these right, there's no opportunity there, right? Because how else are you doing it? Like, are you just low cutting the offer?
So it totally depends on what market you're in. Because if you're doing ground up construction, so let's assume that that's what we're talking about here is ground up construction. Depending on your market, like in my market, land is relatively cheap. I'm going to pay $110,000 to $200,000 for the lot. When I'm done, I'm going to have a $3 million building. I cannot choose to not build certain walls to save money. So it really is more about how can you create a deal that generates more income. And what I love and is working right now, and one that we're doing, is a 3-story mixed use building. We have commercial tenants on the bottom, 1 floor of short-term rentals, and then 1 floor of long-term rentals. And so it diversifies the cash flow, and it gives us extra juice cash flow with the short-term rental piece. And then the commercial tenants can then be catered to basically enhance the short-term rental guest and even the long-term rental guest. So it's really about understanding what's needed in your market and how to maximize the revenue inside of just one building. And then the other thing that's still working is the build to sell, because the townhomes, we build 1,000 square foot houses, and we can build 6 to 20 of them. And the price per square foot is high, but the overall price point is really low, because no builder is going to build, hardly any of them will build less than 2,000 square foot. So even though the price per square foot is low, it's a $350,000 to $500,000 house when you're done. Mine are like $250,000. So it's still very affordable. So it's really, really knowing your niche and how to optimize it.
I don't know about the Lincoln market, but the Omaha downtown market is almost impossible to get into. It's an old historic area. You know, it takes an act of God to bulldoze a building down. I remember looking at a property last year. It had an old saloon on the main level that was been condemned for years, and the floor was actually caving into the basement. And then it's got 2 stories above it where you could probably put in 8 apartments, and nice apartments. But you're going to have to put an elevator shaft in, elevator system in for that, and with the new code. And I mean, outside looking in, that purchase of that building condemned would be at least $800,000. And then renovation costs, I mean, I'm guessing with 8 apartments that you're going to be, you know, well over $2 million. But I'm not deep into the commercial side, but the numbers are just really, really hard for me to kind of put together.
So on a legacy product like that, your friend is going to be historical tax credits. Mm-hmm. So they have a way for you to get those. Now, with that said, I pass on those. I do not like historical tax credits because the process is really long. You give up control because you have to do certain finishes, regardless if you can afford them or if you want them or if you can't source them, or you're not going to get the tax credits. I believe just go 2 blocks from there and build something really cool or renovate a less historical building, because the velocity and the ability for you to turn your money so much faster than having to wait on historical tax credits and all of that process, you're probably better off at the end of the day. And I just work better with people who want to move really fast, and I work way worse with people who want to slow the process down. And that's what you get from historical tax credits. So if you have that type of project or building that you're passionate about, that's the venue to be able to afford it in an old historical building like that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about you outside of making money. What drives you?
I don't know. That is such a good question.
Cowboys.
Yeah, cowboys. Yeah. I want to be able to afford a really large ranch one day. And so turns out I'm going to have to be really freaking successful. No, I am kind of internally driven just by wanting to do cool shit. Like, my goal is when we get our hands on a cool old building, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I want to produce that for people in the future. So the next 2-3 generations of real estate investors, if they got one of our products, it would be like, that's a win. And that sounds so cheesy, but like, my kids are empty nesters now. So it's not like I'm being driven by so I can be at home with them. You know, I want to be an awesome grandma, but we ain't ready for that yet. And so I don't really know. Maybe it's just a lot of dysfunctionalness in my past that makes me feel like I have to prove myself. Maybe that's what motivates me and keeps me going.
When you finally feel like you've succeeded, are you going to go buy your mom a new Corvette?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. And I'm so selfish, it hasn't even occurred to me. But now that you mention it, that's a great idea. Maybe I'll just buy it for myself and let her ride in it.
You should go buy that exact one. That would be, because it's such an impact in your story.
That would be so amazing. Okay, I won't let her listen to this podcast, so she won't see it coming.
You got to post that on Instagram when it happens. Full video, everything. We'll definitely be watching that. Well, Katie, the podcast today has been so enlightening. We don't get the chance to talk to too many developers. I thank Megan for bringing you on. We would never have the opportunity to have you on. I'm sure you would have been like, oh man, who's REIA Radio? I'm not going to bring them on. But thank you so much. I hope that you got as much out of this as we have. But we have a section that we famously call Failing Forward.
This Failing Forward is brought to you by Magic Door. Magic Door is the AI-powered property management platform designed to handle everything from the rent cycle to the vacancy and maintenance cycles. During the rent cycle, Magic Door collects rent, sends automatic reminders, deducts management fees, and distributes payments to owners. In the vacancy cycle, Magic Door streamlines listings, tenant applications, seamless multi-language communication, screening tenants, and converting applications into leases with one click. And for the maintenance cycle, Magic Door's AI handles everything, asking tenants key questions, assigning tasks to vendors, and scheduling repairs automatically without you getting involved. With no hidden fees, no onboarding costs, and seamless AI-powered automation, Magic Door takes care of the entire property management lifecycle so you can focus on what matters most.
Oh, look at that. The female feel to it. In this section, it is a lesson that you had in life. It could be business or personal. A failure that you had that you would never take away because there's a lesson that came out of it. Do you have an example for us?
Oh my gosh. It's time for me to come up with something. I feel like I fail a lot. I'm really good at failing forward. Totally taught that to my kids. I'm trying to think of something that really like stood out. I think we've been blessed that whenever we should have failed, like God or the universe or someone bails us out. But I mean, I think my greatest obstacle that's held me back is I didn't trust or believe in myself. And I had to surround myself with people who I could borrow their trust in me, but I didn't know that I didn't trust myself. I always thought like I wasn't really worthy, or I'm just a girl, or what do I know? You know, like I never had confidence. And then I get around guys that are completely incompetent, but they have so much confidence. And I was like, where does that come from? And so I have had, like mentors along the way that have really challenged my thinking in that area. So, I mean, I think my failure that I could be so much further in life is if I would have just learned to believe in myself a whole lot sooner. That answer totally sucks, but it's the best I got.
Was there like a pivot moment where that really changed for you?
Yeah.
Like I know that moment in my life, that was where everything went different. What was that? Yeah.
I was managing all of our commercial sites. And what I realized was I can either manage the project or I can find the next deal. I could not do both at the same time. So I wanted to hire a construction manager. And I was so like, where's that money going to come from? How are we going to pay for it? He's got to feed his family. And then if it doesn't work out, like all of the craziness around like why this probably isn't going to work. And so I was talking to one of my mentors and he goes, so like, what's the worst case scenario? And I'm like, bankruptcy. And he was just quiet for a long time because, I was being a smart ass. And he goes, okay, so if that happens, what would you do? And I was like, oh, he's serious. I was like, well, I would get there a lot faster next time because I have so much more knowledge. I have so many learning curves that I'm already past all of that. I may leave my town and go somewhere else. I'll be so embarrassed. But at the end of the day, that's the worst case scenario. And I totally felt confident in that moment. I could totally do this again. And that made me realize, oh my God, had I had this conversation 10 years earlier, I would have scaled. I would have surrounded myself with better people. Like I just would have been willing to take risks that made sense.
Do you teach that in your coaching?
I will now. Do you think it's good?
Well, I mean, it was a pivot point for you. Obviously, it was a stress point at some point, not believing in yourself. Mm-hmm. And I'm figuring that there's, other men and women that are in your group that probably have the same internal struggles.
Yeah, you're probably right. I always think I'm the only dysfunctional one, but I bet there's other people out there.
We're all so dysfunctional.
We're jacked up.
Especially her.
Oh, I know Megan. I know her story.
She knows all about it.
She makes me feel so normal.
That's why we brought her on. I was like, I'm going to feel so much better.
That's terrible.
Well, in this final section that we normally call the OT with Owen and Ted is not Owen and Ted. So what are we going to call it, Megan?
I don't know.
It can't be the MT, is it? Because then people are like, it's mountain time or something.
They're like it's empty. It's just empty and dead without Owen.
You're going to get OT with Owen and Ted, presented by PropStream.
PropStream is one of the most trusted real estate data software solutions. PropStream benefits all real estate professionals. You can find properties and contact homeowners on the go with PropStream's mobile app. We offer free academy courses tailored to real estate investors and agents. Take advantage of our live webinar demos to learn the software and scale your real estate business. Visit www.propstream.com and sign up for your 7-day free trial to get more leads and grow your business.
But in this final section, we have 5 questions that we randomly ask you, and sometimes they get mixed up between podcasts, but luckily this is our standard question. So the first question is,
If you were to write a book, what would be the title and what would be the topic?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like it has to be on how to build towns that people love. Because when you talk to someone like, hey, where do you want to go and visit? They're never like, oh, I just really love that cul-de-sac neighborhood in Houston. Like, nobody ever says that. They're like, I want to go to, France or Italy, Florence, all these really cool towns. Maybe New York, San Francisco. And we don't build places like that anymore. So I want to empower people to build towns that they actually want to be in and they're not trying to escape from. So it has to be around that.
where did you escape to when you escaped for 7 years?
I escaped to San Antonio.
Okay.
I don't think that was an escape. Where I escape to is every 3 years, I go to Italy for 2 weeks. That is my true escape and my motivation to realizing like we can design better places to live.
See, I've only been in the Americas. I've been up to Canada and I've been down to South America, but I've never gone over the ocean. It's definitely something that needs to happen real soon. Okay, so Katie, first off, do you have a podcast?
I do not.
Okay, so REIA Radio is your podcast, but you can interview anyone in the world today that's alive. Doesn't have to be real estate. Who's the one person that you want to interview, and what's the one question you'd like to ask if you could have an answer to anything?
Oh my gosh, this is such a crazy answer, but the person who pops into my mind is Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton. I feel like she's come up one time before.
Really?
Yes. Okay, what would you ask her?
She has such an amazing career. Definitely has some dysfunctional parts about it, but she has done so much and is so adored that I just would want to understand, like, what is the secret sauce to connect with people to get her the success that she's gotten.
What was your inspiration by creating Dolly World?
Which I've never even been to.
So we were in Ozarks, Missouri. They had like the Dolly Parton, like kind of, I don't know, dinner and a show type thing.
Okay.
I forgot what they called it. And so we went to it, and part of the show, and it was a whole cowboy show and whatnot. And part of the show was they wanted to call kids down to catch a chicken. And so they picked my, at the time, 6-year-old little girl to go do this. And so I had to take her, and there was 3 other kids. And you got to remember, there's thousands of people in there, and we got picked. So I'm taking my little girl, and we're going on out there right on the dirt. She's the one that gets the chicken first. This girl is a city girl, never touched a chicken.
She caught the chicken?
She caught the chicken.
Oh, that's amazing.
And she got a big trophy, and she got some gifts, and she was like, my wife took a video, and she told everybody, and we had to go to class, we had to show the video, and she was so excited she caught the chicken. I'm like, man, you got country girl all up in you.
Totally. I love that. That's a girl that's going to be successful.
Okay, this is such a sad question. I can't believe
it's really deep.
It is so deep.
Yes.
So let's pretend you died.
Almost did on a railroad track. So I can
you hit by a train and you die.
Now you got to tell a story afterwards.
Who is there saying your eulogy, and what are they saying?
Yeah, I mean, I would want it to be my kids because they're next to my husband, the most important people, in my life. And we've worked so hard with everything we've done to make them great humans. So one of my kids, even though I wouldn't be able to do that for my parents, but let's assume they could. And I would want them to say, she dreamed big, she worked hard, and she pushed us to be the best people we could be, and always instilled in us, average is unacceptable. Ooh. So I want them to think I dreamed big, loved hard, and went after everything that I wanted to be able to create a better place for them. And they felt loved all the way through it.
So I would say kids is the number one answer, as you can imagine. Do you want to know what the number 2 answer is usually?
What?
Samuel Jackson.
Samuel Jackson.
I just want him to go up with his voice. I'm like, he's gonna be long dead. We probably have AI do it for
I
you.
would probably do like Sean Connery. I like his voice. Oh, Sam Elliott. That's a good voice.
I want all my best friends of my life that are still alive to come and tell the best stories and then have a great party afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be sick. I'll come to your party.
Yes.
Your death
Okay, so this next question, I want you to put yourself in the mindset that you're talking to this person directly and you're speaking to them. What mentor has had the biggest impact on your life? And it can be business or personal. And if you could speak directly to them right now and pretend that we're him or her, what do you want to say and how are you going to say thank you to them?
So it's going to be that mentor that pushed me and believed me when I didn't believe in myself. I'm pretty sure he knows. If I'm not insulting you, I'm complimenting you. So I would probably have to address it something like this. Hey, somebody's going to give me $500 to tell you how I feel about you. So suck it up. Don't say a word and just listen. I appreciate you believing in me when I did not believe in myself, for pushing me to my limits, but then always supporting me and not making me feel too dumb. By the way, you're kind of arrogant and unapproachable. You may want to work on that.
I love that. You want to shout that person out, or are we keeping that on a DM?
You'll know. Randy Van's story, but I'm not going to let him listen to this podcast because I don't want him to hear the nice things I said.
So we'll cut that out so short, and we'll make sure we put it. Hey, you mentioned a train story earlier.
Yeah.
We can't just let that go because if I was listening to this right now, I'm like, what is the train story where you almost died? Can you say that real quick before we cut?
Yeah. So I get around my town on a scooter, a little electric scooter, and have for years.
You don't look like an electric scooter type of gal.
I know, but it's great because all of our projects are downtown. I can just zoom around. I don't have to worry about parking. It's the fastest way. Before I joined this freaking fitness challenge where I have to take a bunch of steps. But before that, the scooter was the answer. And we've done it for years. We're in a downtown, so we have all these freaking railroad tracks. And I went over a railroad track coming back from lunch to my office on a Saturday. And the next thing I know, I was awake in a hospital 24 hours later. Turns out someone found me laying on the railroad track, unconscious. Although I say unconscious, unaware. So I think I was could talk, but I didn't know that. I don't have any memory of it. So she called 911. 911 asked if she was capable of dragging me off the railroad track, which makes me think must have been bad because they usually don't want to move you when there's an injury. And she said yes. So she dragged me off the track and then she left.
She left when the ambulance got there?
No. When the ambulance got there, no one was there.
What?
Just me laying next to the railroad track.
Okay, wait. So she saved your life and then just left you to be kidnapped or whatever. Or
no. I mean, it's in the middle of downtown in the middle of the day. I cannot
that person
figure
had
out
something going on that day, or they are in trouble with the law.
Or they hit you.
Yeah, and that's what we don't know. Because all we know is I didn't try and prevent the fall. So my eye socket caught me. And so it broke in 3 places. I broke the end of my elbow off. But it's not like I had any wrist injuries. Like there was no attempt. So I did not see it coming. I have no idea what happened. I just know that a train didn't come that day. So it ended up being the best day of my life because had it came, there was no way it was going to be able to stop. And I'm thankful for the lady for dragging me off the railroad track. Would love to talk to her because I don't know why she left the scene. Like that seems so odd to be willing to call, to drag me off and then to leave. And I mean, we're 3 blocks from the fire department. It's not like
there's a legal thing going on there. You would only leave somebody if you have a legal thing or it's a life and death situation going on that's elsewhere.
Maybe. That could be it. Maybe she had a warrant out for arrest or something. She needed to be gone before they came. It totally could be. I hadn't thought of that, but it could be.
I mean, that's the only logical reason why somebody would do something so right and wrong.
Right and wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I hit somebody with my car once, not a walking person. That sounded worse than it really was. My car hit another car and they ran. And I was like, they got to be an illegal or they got to be something. They didn't want to stick around for the cops, even though it clearly was my fault.
Your fault.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the deal. That makes more sense than anything else. We tried to get camera footage and all of that, but we couldn't find any footage of the accident.
That's crazy.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway.
So how can our listeners support you? How can they find you? Where are you at?
Well, I would love for you to follow me on Instagram at Katie Develops. There, you can follow along in all my projects. And if this is something that you might be interested in or passionate about, go to my website, katieneason.com, see what I do. And if it resonates with you and you want to build a beautiful town or figure out if it makes sense for you, I would love to connect with you and talk to you about it because I believe in a strong America. It requires that all of us do our part.
That's awesome.
Man, you got that down to a science the way you ended that. I love that.
Can I dig in real quick right here? So is your course or program more for like new investors, they have to have some experience? Would you say like it's fine if they don't, or what does that look like?
Yeah, ideally, it's not the program for you if you're trying to get your first rental or your first, like mini storage type place, because it's just not set up for that. It's perfect if you have an industry knowledge. So maybe you're an architect or whatever, or you're a real estate investor and you're trying to figure out like how to add this tool to your tool chest of development. So we do have a few newbies in there trying to figure it out, but it is not catered to teach you what all the words mean in real estate. If you want to go and get your first deal, freaking do the first deal program. My son does it. Megan is his sponsor or coach or whatever, and it's amazing for that. But if you're trying to figure out how development works and if it's right for you, it will be better if you have some experience either in the industry or in real estate investing.
Okay, cool.
Last night I did a cigar and whiskey tasting, and I was with Ryan Miller. I told him we were doing an interview with you, and he got so excited. He's like, I am actually about to sign up for her coaching program.
Oh.
And I know you know.
I love him.
Yeah, so
You don't know him, but you love him.
I don't know him, but I love him.
he's like, I'm definitely gonna listen to that. He goes, I'm like gonna sign up for that program like this week. He goes, I'm in the process. So a testament. I mean, how random was that? Here we are in Omaha, and I'm talking to somebody. Obviously, he's part of the masterminds, and but yeah, he's like, yeah. He goes, and he does commercial, and he's like, I'm joining her program. And I was like, well, that's something right there. I'm excited to have her on.
Yeah, I love it. I'm still always shocked, and it feels awkward because I don't know how to respond when someone is like, oh my God, I know you, like from Instagram or something. Like that still feels so weird.
Well, you only have 55,000 followers.
Right.
How do you get so many followers?
I don't know. I think it's just because there's
Katie.
I mean, that's a lot though. That's huge.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
well, consistent posting for those of you trying to do your followings. Definitely consistent posting. Post stuff that people are interested in, and be in a niche that there aren't very many other people.
Yeah, I agree. But hey, Katie, I know I want to respect your time, and we want to let your contractors get back to work back there. Yeah, I can imagine what you said to them when you ran back there and said, "Get quiet." But thank you for spending an hour and 28 minutes on the call with us today. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure meeting you. I can't wait to meet you at one of the conferences. You little conference junkie, you.
Yeah, I'd love that. It was such a joy. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Megan. This was a real treat.
And Megan, also, thank you for setting us up. I really appreciate it. It has been a pleasure having you on the podcast, and I think you've been on more than anybody else. I think you're officially beat Sarah Weaver now.
Nice.
But with that, Katie, we look forward to having you back on in the future. We'll put all your links in the show notes, and we will catch up with you guys later.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
So yeah.
Bye.
When we say this, we're going to say it in sync.
Oh.
Gotta love it. Hey, you know what? This is her first
It's
time
my first
co-hosting.
time.
So-
I love it. I like to see her
I'm
sweat.
I know. I'm like, thanks for having me. And I'm like, wait a second. I don't know what I'm doing.
If you don't want to do it, I'll just.
You just do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I didn't take my meds this morning.
This is where you say it. You can say your thank you, and then you just end the show.
And then we're like, really?
And then you do it's your show. You can do whatever you want.